I'm Joe Graydon.
I'm Terry Graydon. The People's Pharmacy podcast is brought to you in part by Squatty Potty, the original toilet step stool that creates healthy toilet posture. Learn how squatting relaxes the colon and allows for easy, healthy elimination at squattypotty.com.
And by Comfy, makers of all-natural buckwheat hull pillows. Comfy pillows provide superior support by conforming to your head and neck for healthy, restful sleep. On the web at comfycomfy.com. For 10% off your first order, enter the code PEOPLES at checkout. Each diet dictocrat believes his dietary recommendations are universal. What if there's no perfect diet for everyone? This is the People's Pharmacy with Terry and Joe Graydon.
New research from Israel suggests that each of us responds in a unique way to the foods we eat. Some people get blood sugar spikes after eating ice cream, while others get their sharpest rise in blood sugar from mashed potatoes.
We'll find out how this research affects you and your coming holiday food choices. Do you have successful strategies to avoid overeating at parties? Share your experience with us.
Coming up on the People's Pharmacy, the health news that matters to you with your calls and questions.
First, the news.
In the People's Pharmacy health headlines, taking popular antidepressants during pregnancy may increase the risk that the baby will have autism or a similar problem as it grows older. This conclusion results from analysis of data on 145,456 pregnancies in the province of Quebec. The medical records had information on whether the mothers were taking antidepressants during pregnancy. They also had information on the children up to age 10. The researchers found that when women took an SSRI antidepressant such as fluoxetine, paroxetine, or sertraline during the second or third trimester, the chance of the child having a developmental disorder was 87% higher. These drugs may be better known by their brand names Prozac, Paxil, and Zoloft. The overall risk is still very modest, and doctors warn that women should not stop their antidepressants without medical supervision.
Many over-the-counter cold and flu medicines contain acetaminophen, better known as the active ingredient in Tylenol. For example, familiar products such as Dayquil, NyQuil, Contact Cold and Flu, or Theraflu all contain acetaminophen, presumably to help control fever and reduce aches and pains. Now a study from New Zealand questions whether acetaminophen is useful for influenza. In this randomized controlled trial, 80 people with flu-like symptoms and a positive influenza test were given either acetaminophen or placebo 4 times a day for 5 days, in addition to the prescription influenza drug Tamiflu. The investigators measured viral loads at several points during the illness. The patients kept records of their symptoms and their temperatures. The findings showed no difference between the groups with respect to symptoms, including temperature, duration of illness, and viral shedding. The researchers suggest that there is not enough evidence to recommend the use of acetaminophen to treat influenza, but the use of Tamiflu by all study participants may have influenced the results.
Moderate alcohol consumption has been shown to partially protect healthy people from dementia. Now a study from Denmark suggests that people with early-stage Alzheimer's disease may also benefit from light to moderate drinking. This research included more than 300 Danish adults with mild Alzheimer's disease. The study ran for a year, and subjects were followed for an additional 3 years. Those individuals who were in the habit of consuming a drink or two a day in the form of a pint of beer or a glass of wine were less likely to die during the follow-up period than those who did not drink alcohol at all. Experts in the field caution that older people with dementia should not start consuming alcohol, but if they're already moderate drinkers, alcohol should not be prohibited.
Cocoa flavanols have been shown to increase blood vessel flexibility in healthy individuals. A new study shows that those with kidney failure get the same benefits from these plant-based compounds. People with poor kidney function are at high risk of dying from cardiovascular complications. In this study, 57 people on dialysis were randomized to drink a high flavanol cocoa beverage every day for a month or a placebo that was free of flavanols but otherwise similar to the cocoa. Those consuming the high flavanol cocoa had lower blood pressure at the end of the month. Measurements showed their blood vessels were also more flexible. Those consuming the flavanol-free control beverage did not experience those changes. The lead researcher noted that drinking a high flavanol beverage was approximately as effective as taking a statin drug in the benefits the patients experienced.
Pomegranates have a similar reputation to cocoa as benefiting the flexibility of blood vessels and lowering blood pressure. A small study in the Journal of Medicinal Food found that a pomegranate extract taken daily for 6 months lowered blood pressure slightly and increased one marker of antioxidant activity in dialysis patients compared to placebo. The pomegranate extract had no effect on other measurements such as muscle strength, inflammation, or physical functioning. The scientists had chosen pomegranate extract for this study instead of pomegranate juice because the juice is high in potassium, and dialysis patients need to be careful not to consume too much potassium. The authors concluded that the benefits of pomegranate extract in dialysis patients may be limited to those who have high blood pressure to begin with. And that's the health news from the People's Pharmacy this week. Welcome to the People's Pharmacy. I'm Terry Graydon. I'm a medical anthropologist.
And I'm Joe Graydon. I'm a pharmacologist. From now until New Year's Day, Americans will be eating huge quantities of food. Office parties, neighborhood gatherings, and family feasts mean calories and more calories. No sooner do you recover from New Year's Eve festivities than you get to look forward to the Super Bowl and more gorging. Weight gained over the next several weeks could take months to burn off.
Do you have a strategy for avoiding weight gain through the festive feasting season? If so, we'd like to hear from you. The number to call to join the conversation is 888-472-3366. You can email us, radio@peoplespharmacy.com, or get in touch through Twitter. We're at People's Pharmacy.
We often hear recommendations for one dietary approach or another. Maybe you love following a low-fat diet, while your best friend is a fanatic about a low-carb diet. They couldn't be more different. But how do you know which one is best?
It may be that no one diet suits everyone. Perhaps we're all different when it comes to how our bodies handle food. That seems to be the implication of some fascinating research done in Israel recently.
To learn more about it, we talked with one of the authors of the study published in the journal Cell. Dr. Aaron Siegel is professor of computer science and applied mathematics at the Weizmann Institute of Science in Israel.
Welcome to the People's Pharmacy, Dr. Siegel.
Thank you. Hi.
It's nice to have you with us, Dr. Siegel. You have ignited a firestorm of controversy here in the U.S. and around the world as a result of your research. Now, we must point out that you're not a dietitian, you're not a nutrition scientist, but you are a computer guy. You use some very sophisticated equipment. Can you tell us how you did what you did and what you found?
Sure. So what we did was to look at the blood sugar levels in individuals after they consume meals. Altogether, we had close to 1,000 people that we profiled using continuous glucose monitors for 1 week each. And during that week, individuals logged all of their food intake. So we had a total of close to 50,000 different meals whose blood sugar response we looked at. And we then developed a mathematical model to try and predict how blood sugar levels in people change after meals using a variety of different parameters that we collected from people. The first very striking observation that we saw was that when different people eat identical meals, their blood sugar levels could be very, very different. So, for example, some people would eat bread and their blood sugar levels would spike to very high levels, whereas others would eat the exact same bread, but their blood sugar levels would not change at all. And this, I would say, is the first very striking observation that we found, namely that different people have very different blood sugar responses to exactly the same meals.
This is fascinating because it relates to the idea of glycemic index or glycemic load that I think we have been arguing with various healthcare professionals about for maybe 10 or 15 years. We'll say, isn't that important? And they'll say, nah, it doesn't matter. And what you're telling us is the reason they're saying it doesn't matter is because it's not reliable from one person to another.
Right. Well, I would not say that it doesn't matter. I would say that in our research, we also found that one can compute the average of different people to an identical meal, and that average in our research actually corresponds very well to what has been published on the glycemic index of different foods. However, we also found, as I mentioned before, is that there are very different levels in different people, and so even though you can compute the average, it's not clear what that will mean to a given individual. And if, for example, a certain glycemic index of a food would be 70% accurate for one person, then that may be a good guess for that particular food. But then if you go on and think about an entire meal plan, then you might be 70% accurate on the first food and 80% accurate on the second and 70% on the third and so on. And eventually when you accumulate an entire meal plan, there is a very high chance that you will be incorrect on many foods. And we believe that this striking variability that we found between different people may in part explain why essentially any general diet that we prescribe to everyone may be bound to not succeed.
Now, I have to confess, Dr. Siegel, I'm a bit of a gadget freak, and I was fascinated to see that you used some sort of skin-mounted monitor to have these continuous blood sugar measurements. Could you describe that a little bit and the mobile app that goes with it?
Sure. So we really wanted to collect an unprecedented amount of data, and so we used devices that actually are used. These are FDA approved. There's several companies that provide them, and these devices measure glucose levels using it's a small needle that goes under the skin, and it measures through the interstitial fluid. It measures glucose levels every 5 minutes, and so if you connect somebody for a week, we could get in a single week 2,000 glucose measurements of a person. Now, in order to relate those glucose levels to what people actually eat, we also developed a mobile app, and people logged all of their food intake. We also provided them with scales, so they weighed all the foods that they consumed, and they selected them using the mobile app from a database of close to 10,000 different foods for which we have full nutritional values. And in this way, at the end, we could have the entire nutritional value of every meal that people consumed. And on the mobile app, of course, you know the exact time in which they ate. And then in the computational analysis, you can see how the glucose curve changes exactly at the time when people report on meals. And by that, you can calculate what was the response to every one of those different meals. And altogether, we had 50,000 such calculations of responses to different meals.
Extraordinary. It really is an amazing concept, and it seems light years ahead of what we've been doing for the past 50 years. But I'd like to talk a bit about the algorithm, because you developed a way of, in a sense, predicting, and you actually compared that to nutrition experts, and the algorithm won. Can you explain how that works? And also, how is it possible that some people did okay with a little alcohol, chocolate, or even ice cream?
So first, about the algorithm. So as I mentioned, the first striking result was these very big differences that we saw in how different people respond to the same meal. And then we, of course, wanted to see whether we can predict it in some fashion. And so in the study, we also collected many different parameters from people. These included parameters that people filled out in questionnaires. So we had medical background questionnaires and a standard food frequency questionnaire. We also drew blood from people and measured 30 different metabolic parameters in the blood, like standard blood work that people do. And perhaps the most novel component that we examined was using a stool sample. We isolated all of the DNA that comes from gut bacteria, and we did that in every individual. And as you may know, each of us actually carries hundreds or thousands of different species of bacteria. There's been groundbreaking research by many groups around the world in the past 7 or 8 years since this field of research has started, showing that our gut bacteria are heavily involved in our health and disease. And there's really seminal works showing, for example, that if you take gut bacteria from an overweight person and you transplant them into mice that have no bacteria, these mice will gain weight on the same diet as other mice who did not receive gut bacteria or who received gut bacteria from a lean individual. So they are heavily involved in our metabolism. Last year, we published a paper where we showed that consumption of artificial sweeteners alters the composition of gut bacteria that people have in a way that can actually even induce markers of diabetes. And so our gut bacteria are heavily involved in our metabolism, and for that reason, we extensively profiled these gut bacteria in all close to 1,000 individuals in our study, and that was another very extensive parameter that we obtained. And what we then did was to develop an algorithm. These are called machine learning algorithms. It's actually very similar conceptually to the algorithms that we all know from, for example, Amazon or Netflix, where you go online and you tell Amazon the last 2 books that you read and liked, and Amazon can quite well predict what is another book that you will like by finding other people who liked similar books to the one that you liked and predicting another one that you will like based on that. And so essentially we have done the same thing for food and for blood glucose responses to food. The algorithm searches for patterns in all of these parameters that I mentioned, the clinical parameters of people and also parameters related to gut bacteria. And it could identify in these patterns similarities between different individuals that may have similar responses to food. And so using that, the algorithm could predict what would be the personalized blood glucose response of people to essentially any arbitrary meal. And so the way we validated it was to develop the algorithm and to then recruit an additional new set of 100 people and apply the algorithm on this new set of 100 people. And we found that it actually achieved very high accuracy, even though these were 100 people that the algorithm never saw and did not train on these data.
You're listening to Dr. Aaron Siegel, Professor of Computer Science and Applied Mathematics at the Weizmann Institute of Science in Rehovot, Israel. His article is Personalized Nutrition by Prediction of Glycemic Responses. You'll find a link to it from peoplespharmacy.com.
When we come back, we'll hear more from Dr. Siegel about his research. Why is it so hard to figure out which diet is best? And share your own experience with diets at 888-472-3366. You can email us, radio@peoplespharmacy.com. The number again to join the conversation, 888-472-3366.
You're listening to The People's Pharmacy with Joe and Terry Graydon.
If you like the information you hear when you listen to The People's Pharmacy, you may also enjoy our book published by National Geographic. It's The People's Pharmacy Quick and Handy Home Remedies, available online at peoplespharmacy.com or at your favorite bookstore.
Welcome back to The People's Pharmacy. I'm Terry Graydon.
And I'm Joe Graydon. The People's Pharmacy is made possible by Red X Industries, makers of utterly smooth creams and lotions that moisturize deeply to make dry skin feel soft and smooth. The number's 800-345-7339, online at uttercream.com.
And by Squatty Potty, the original toilet footstool that creates healthy toilet posture. You can learn how squatting relaxes the colon and allows for easier, healthier elimination at squattypotty.com.
If you'd like to purchase a CD of this show, you can call 800-732-2334. Today's show is number 1017, or find it online at peoplespharmacy.com. Today we're talking about the health news that matters to you, and we're talking with Dr. Aaron Siegel of the Weizmann Institute in Israel about his new research on personalized nutrition and glycemic response.
What's been your experience with dieting? Have you found a diet that you like best? Have you tried a paleo diet? What about the Dean Ornish low-fat approach? Give us a call at 888-472-3366. You can also email us, radio@peoplespharmacy.com, or get in touch by way of Twitter. We're at People's Pharmacy.
Dr. Siegel, a lot of our listeners want to know, well, okay, how do I make sense of this new research? What's the best diet for me? I mean, should I be eating the paleo diet? Should I be eating the Atkins diet? Should it be the Dean Ornish diet?
And of course, it's important because we realize that blood sugar response is related to diabetes, it's related to metabolic syndrome, it's related to weight gain, it's related to heart disease, cholesterol levels, all kinds of important things.
Absolutely. These are excellent points and excellent questions. So, indeed, the reason why we went after blood glucose levels in the first place was for all the reasons you just mentioned. It's really critical to our health and weight management and prevention of disease. And I think one of the novel aspects of the study was that we actually used the blood sugar levels immediately following meals as a marker of healthy nutrition. And that really allowed us to obtain dozens of measurements of healthy nutrition per individual in a single week, compared, for example, to studies that look at, that prescribe some diet and look at change in body weight or change in other markers in the blood that take several weeks or several months to change. And in those types of studies, you have to wait a long time, and then you get a single readout for the change, which is also, of course, affected by many different factors. So here we could, in a single week, obtain dozens of different measurements. And as to the question of, what should people take away and what they should do, I again return to our main finding, which is the huge variability that we see in people. And there's been actually fascinating papers published just recently doing kind of a meta-analysis of essentially thousands of papers that looked at different types of diets. And the overall conclusion is that essentially all of the dietary approaches that we've been taking are actually failing and not really working. And I think that relates to the individuality that we found in this study, namely that people, you give them identical meals and they respond very differently. And so I think that based on these results, we might say that one would have to be profiled in some manner in order to know what is the best dietary routine for that person.
And of course, people are reasonably capable of figuring out what's working for them. So I'm guessing that when somebody says, the Atkins diet really works for me, I lose weight, I feel better, I'm more energetic, and I get things done. And the high-carb diet, the Dean Ornish diet, is just not doing it, and vice versa. So we should probably, short of following your technology and using your algorithm, try and find the diet that's actually working best for us and making us feel good.
I would agree with that. So until this technology is available for people, I would absolutely agree that one approach would be to empirically try out different diets. And I do believe that the diets that are most popular, they are most popular because actually for probably many people they do work, but we also know from studies that there's no single diet that works for everybody. We tried so many diets that I do think if there was one diet that works for all, then we would have found it. And the fact that diets in general are not working is probably because a single diet doesn't fit everybody. But if people try out different diets and maybe the most popular ones is one place to start, they could figure it out for themselves. Of course, it's a lengthy and tedious process, but I think conceptually the idea that people are different and there's a different diet for everybody leads us to believe that this would be an approach that may work.
Dr. Siegel, your research is so exciting. Do you foresee a time when your approach, the analysis, the algorithms will be applicable to people outside of the study situation?
We certainly hope so. So this study was a very extensive study that we started 4 years ago. And like all studies that we do and that we do at the Weizmann Institute, this was curiosity-driven research. We were really fascinated by the fact that we're seeing this rise in metabolic syndrome, and there's really not a lot of explanations for it. And so we wanted to take an unbiased scientific approach to the problem of nutrition. And that's what we did here. And having seen the success of the algorithms and the approach, our institute, at the conclusion of the study, which was entirely funded by our own academic grants and by internal funds from the institute, at the conclusion of the study, the institute licensed the technology to a company, and that company is now working to develop the technology and reduce the set of inputs that would be required to obtain, hopefully to mainly rely on a stool sample from which gut bacteria could be obtained, and with the addition of additional clinical parameters from people, be able then to provide personalized dietary recommendations for people.
Dr. Siegel, thank you so much for talking with us on the People's Pharmacy today.
Sure, my pleasure. Thank you.
You've been listening to Dr. Aaron Siegel, Professor of Computer Science and Applied Mathematics at the Weizmann Institute of Science in Rehovot, Israel. His article is Personalized Nutrition by Prediction of Glycemic Responses, and we've put a link to it from peoplespharmacy.com.
What I like so much about this notion of personalized nutrition is that it is following a concept called personalized medicine that has evolved over the last decade or three. You know, it basically relies on our genetics, our epigenetics, our activity level, and it helps us better understand how we're going to respond to medications. So the idea that researchers can predict, this medicine will work for you, but not for the other person. Now we can apply that same basic concept to nutrition. Really cool stuff.
And of course, we're still a little ways out from being able to say this is the right medicine for you before you try it.
But we're getting close.
Getting closer. Well, what diet works best for you? And what strategies do you use to keep from overeating at holiday parties? Share your secrets. Give us a call. 888-472-3366. You can email us, radio@peoplespharmacy.com. Send us a message through Twitter. We're at People's Pharmacy. Again, join the conversation at 888-472-3366.
We go to Eden, North Carolina. Brad, welcome to the People's Pharmacy. Your question, please.
Hi, Joe and Terry. For me, this doesn't seem to work for a lot of people, but I find that fasting for a day or two helps me control my weight, and I'm just wondering how if that is affecting the gut bacteria, and if that's changing my metabolism. I know it changes my metabolism because when I do fast, I feel colder, but other than that, I feel great. It really gives me kind of a boost.
Well, Brad, that's a fascinating question as to how it affects the gut bacteria, and we don't know the answer to that. I don't know if anyone has done that research, but this idea of intermittent fasting actually is a weight control strategy that has been studied and found effective for many people. You obviously are one of them.
And Brad, you know what's very interesting about your question? This notion of what we call the microbiome, our gut bacteria, is incredibly relevant these days because so many things can actually affect that. And that's what Dr. Siegel was studying in part in this Israeli study. Well, there's a new study out just this week that suggests that proton pump inhibitors, and tens of millions of people take these drugs. We're talking about Prilosec, Prevacid, Nexium. These are drugs that really dramatically affect the acidity in your stomach. And, we've thought of them as wonder drugs, and for some people perhaps they are, but they also affect, guess what, our gut bacteria. It turns out that there's less diversity of these bacteria when you're taking a proton pump inhibitor. You find more of the bacteria that's usually in the mouth. And it turns out that some of the good bacteria, the beneficial bacteria, they're in lower numbers in your digestive tract, and you have more harmful bacteria in higher numbers, and perhaps an increased risk of developing C. diff. So, Brad, your question is very relevant. How does fasting and other factors affect gut bacteria? And the answer is we're just beginning to do the research. Thank you so much for the call.
Great, thank you.
Bye-bye.
And we go to Wilmington, North Carolina. Gloria, please tell us your story.
Hi, Joe and Terry. After I had thyroid cancer, I gained a whole lot of weight, and other diets I'd tried in the past did not seem to work. And right around the same time, menopause came. And the only thing that I've found that has worked for me has been mini fasting, eating like about 200 to 300 calories in the morning and about 200 to 300 in the evening. Or I could completely fast like 1 or 2 days a week. And, just doing that seems to slowly remove the weight. So that has helped me. That's the only thing that has helped. But I was also wondering, does menopause change the way we respond to glucose?
It can sometimes. So you kind of had a double whammy when you had the thyroid cancer. I'm sure they took your thyroid out or they disabled it completely. And because the thyroid controls our metabolism, it can be really difficult to readjust after that.
And you know what, Gloria? I keep wondering about how well your thyroid replacement is working, because you shouldn't have to restrict your calories to almost starvation levels in order to lose weight. I mean, 600 calories a day, that's crazy. I'm amazed that you're even functional. So what I would like you to do is, check out not just your TSH levels, but your T3, your T4. Make sure your endocrinologist is really digging pretty deep to make sure that your thyroid replacement is doing what it needs to do, because you shouldn't have to be so restrictive on calories to lose weight.
Okay.
Thank you for the call.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Joe, we've got a couple of strategies here. Chrissy has sent us a tweet and says, I never gain weight because I work out regularly. I'm an avid speed walker. And we have an email from Paul. Paul says, here's my dietary strategy. I eat what my wife suggests. Then, at the occasional opportunity, I binge eat. That makes me sick. And then I go back on my beloved's suggested diet, and my weight is fine.
I think that's the best recommendation of all. If you'd like to join our conversation, the number is 888-472-3366. We go to St. Petersburg, Florida. Hi, Bernadette. What's on your mind?
Hi, just wanted to say that I had a lot of health issues, discovered that getting off of the wheat, and as I say, everything sweet, including artificial sugars, regular sugars, has me where I'm walking again. I hadn't been able to walk for over probably 3 years. I was walking with a cane, having, to have assistance, and I walked for the first time without pain on November 7th. But my question today is about Candida. You're talking about the bacteria, the gut bacteria. What is the best way to get rid of? I mean, I'm losing weight. My stomach has shrank, but I'm just concerned that there's some Candida yeast overgrowth. And so do you all have any suggestions on a product or an herb I can use that can help me with that?
Well, you know what you're doing, Bernadette, is probably the best thing that you could possibly do, and that's by cutting out what you've called the wheat and the sweet. 20, 30 years ago, there was a lot of controversy, I guess is the best way to describe it, around this concept of candida overgrowth or yeast infections. And the medical profession in general said, this is quackery, this is nonsense, it's a total waste of time, don't worry about it. And yet the recommendation back then was basically what you're doing now, cutting out refined carbohydrates, cutting out sugar, which seemed to be substrate for yeast. And Terry, you've had some personal experience.
Well, exactly. I find that if I eat too much sugar or too many carbs that make my blood sugar go up, it makes my toes itch. I get a little infection between the toes. It's kind of a fungal infection. It makes my face break out with seborrheic dermatitis, which we think is caused by a yeasty beastie called Malassezia. So clearly, I'm one of those people whose bodies are susceptible to too much sugar. So the idea is just try and make sure that you don't overdo on the sugar. And Joe, we have an email to that effect. Alan emailed from Lake Oswego, and he says, there's an underlying message that the true negative effect of excessive sugar consumption is obesity. I think that's only a partial truth. It seems like there's growing evidence that even for people who are at a healthy weight, they could benefit from limiting sugar consumption. And he would like our thoughts on that. Well, I think he's right.
And I think Bernadette is right. I don't have some sort of magic herb that's going to, kill yeast infections, but I think, watching your diet makes sense. And if we can control blood sugar, we feel better. I mean, I certainly feel better. Those spikes in blood sugar, when that happens, my famous binge on M&Ms or Good and Plenty, an hour, 2 hours later, I just feel blah.
Right, and you don't want to feel blah.
I don't want to feel blah. I want to feel good. So what we eat really makes a difference. 888-472-3366 is the number to call if you have a question or a comment. We go to Joe in Greensboro. Joe, we just have about 30 seconds before the break. What's on your mind?
I just wanted to say I'm a lifestyle coach, and I work with pre-diabetics. And I find the best advice is telling people to go with what Michael Pollan says of eating real food, not too much, mostly plants. I appreciate all that you're doing, but I think sometimes the scientific information becomes overwhelming for clients. And anyway, I just find that when people adhere to that, they lose weight and they improve many of their blood sugar indicators.
Well, Joe, thanks so much. And thanks for reminding us of Michael Pollan's simple formula.
Eat real food. It's not that easy, but it is simple. When we come back, we're going to check in with Dr. David Ludwig about blood sugar, insulin, and how diet affects our metabolism. What does insulin have to do with weight gain? If you'd like to join the conversation, give us a call. 888-472-3366. Email us, radio@peoplespharmacy.com.
You're listening to The People's Pharmacy with Joe and Terry Graydon. If you value the health information you get when you listen to The People's Pharmacy, consider subscribing to our email newsletter. You'll get the latest health news and information on upcoming podcasts delivered to your inbox twice a week. Look for the link at peoplespharmacy.com.
Welcome back to the People's Pharmacy. I'm Joe Graydon.
And I'm Terry Graydon. The People's Pharmacy is made possible in part by Squatty Potty, the original toilet footstool that creates healthy toilet posture. You can learn how squatting relaxes the colon and allows for easier, healthier elimination at squattypotty.com.
And by Redix Industries, makers of utterly smooth creams and lotions, helping dry, cracked skin feel utterly soft and smooth. The number's 800-345-7339, online at uttercream.com.
If you would like to purchase a CD of this show, you can call 800-732-2334. It's show number 1017, or you can do that purchase online at peoplespharmacy.com.
We're exploring the stories behind the health headlines today, and at this time of year, we're all tempted by cookies, candy, and other wonderful holiday treats. Can we avoid gaining weight over the holidays?
If you have a question or a story to share about how you have found the eating plan that suits you best, give us a call, 888-472-3366. You can send us email. We're radio@peoplespharmacy.com, or send us a message through Twitter. We're at People's Pharmacy. Again, join the conversation, 888-472-3366.
We turn now to Dr. David Ludwig. He's an endocrinologist and researcher at Boston Children's Hospital. He's professor of pediatrics at Harvard Medical School and professor of nutrition at Harvard School of Public Health. He's founding director of the Optimal Weight for Life program at Boston Children's Hospital. His new book, Always Hungry, will be published on January 5th. We were fascinated to read his New York Times commentary on Dr. Siegel's research. It's titled, Could Your Healthy Diet Make Me Fat?
Welcome to the People's Pharmacy, Dr. David Ludwig.
Thank you, Terry. Great to talk to you today.
Dr. Ludwig, you're an endocrinologist, you're a researcher. You've had an opportunity to kind of look over Dr. Aaron Siegel's work, and you had a really cool article in the New York Times recently titled, Could Your Healthy Diet Make Me Fat? What were you trying to communicate in that piece?
Well, there have been hundreds of or thousands of diets that people have tried through the decades, and almost always some people do well on any diet and other people do poorly, so that the sum total of results, that average across a population, is consistently poor. But does that mean that each diet is the same and that we just have to count calories and struggle and do our best? Another possibility is that some people, for biological reasons, either due to their genes or their past life experience or their age, their physical activity level, are designed to do uniquely well on one kind of diet, such as a low-carbohydrate, maybe even an Atkins diet, where somebody else might do poorly on that diet but very well on a low-fat diet. If we could identify those people in advance and predict, we could design a much easier and more effective approach for everybody. That's the concept of individualized or personalized nutrition.
And I think a lot of people would be really excited if they could have a way of identifying which diet is best for, if I could find out, for example, which diet is best for me. Is there a way we can find that out?
Well, there's been speculation about this through the years. There was a famous book, Eat Right for Your Type, which focused on blood type. My research and from my group and other groups suggests that a particularly effective way to proceed is to think about the hormone insulin. Insulin is, we can call it the ultimate fat cell fertilizer. When insulin levels are high, when a person either makes a lot of insulin or given an excess amount of insulin, such as in diabetes, they'll consistently gain weight. And when insulin levels are low, such as someone with type 1 diabetes who doesn't get enough insulin, they always lose weight. So we believe that by looking at how much insulin a person makes, we can determine how susceptible they'll be to high-carbohydrate diets, the high-carbohydrate, low-fat diet. If you make a lot of insulin, you're going to be wanting to cut back on carbohydrates the most strenuously. Other people may be able to tolerate more carbohydrate, and we can tell that difference potentially in a simple test.
So there actually is a test that will tell people how much insulin they make?
The test is called the insulin 30 level. We're all familiar with the oral glucose tolerance test that's used to screen for diabetes, and every woman in a pregnancy has a form of that test. Typically, those tests look just to see what happens with blood sugar, but you can also look to see what happens with insulin. So the key time point is the 30-minute value. So after getting oral glucose, 30 minutes later, some people just make a little bit of insulin, just enough to manage the incoming carbohydrate. Other people have an exuberant response. They make a lot of insulin, and that can have serious consequences to the body for many hours to come. People who make that much insulin drive calories into the fat cells. And a few hours later, there aren't enough calories for the rest of the body. That makes us hungry, slows down metabolism. So for those people, not just sugar by itself, glucose, but other fast-digesting carbohydrates create a vicious cycle of high blood sugar and insulin, calories being sucked up into fat cells, and then hunger, leading to more high carbohydrate intake.
Can you give us an example of some of those fast-digesting carbohydrates that we might want to avoid if we suspect or know that we're a person who makes a lot of extra insulin?
Well, sugar has gotten a lot of attention these days, and there's no question that we could all benefit by cutting back on added sugar. And just to emphasize that personalized dieting doesn't mean abandoning general recommendations for the public. And so cutting back on sugar is going to be good for everybody. But in addition to that, all of the processed grains and potato products, they're made of glucose in a long chain. When very processed, we're talking about white bread, white rice, cookies, crackers, all of the low-fat foods that snuck into our diet during the last 30 years. These all digest into sugar literally in minutes and can create as much or more demand for insulin as table sugar itself. So going back to some degree to the higher-fat, richer, more luscious diets of the 1950s and 60s before the low-fat craze kicked in, but with our new understanding about the quality of fats added to that.
So, Dr. Ludwig, as people face holiday feasting, parties, New Year's just around the corner, how can they make wise eating choices without gaining weight over the next couple of weeks?
Well, we're all probably going to overeat at some point. That's the nature of the holidays. It's a feast. And we just want to protect ourselves from the long-term negative consequences of that. And I'll make a provocative claim that overeating by itself doesn't make us fat. Think about what happens in force-feeding studies that have been done for decades. Yes, you can make people gain weight by forcing them to eat too much, but they wind up experiencing very strong satiety, internal responses that decrease hunger and speed up metabolism. Once the force-feeding study ends, people naturally lose weight back to where they started. We want to take advantage of those natural, hardwired protective mechanisms. They occur if we eat slow-digesting, satiating foods, enough protein, healthful fats, and slow-digesting carbohydrates. A very different process happens if we binge on the highly processed carbohydrates. And think about it. What are the common binge foods? It's not butter, olive oil, eggs, beef jerky. It's the processed carbs. People will much more easily binge on popcorn, bread, cookies, crackers, processed breakfast cereals. So those are the ones we want to go very easy on. Save the refined carbs for dessert, and begin your meal. Have the appetizers, have the meal based around protein, healthful fats, and slow-digesting carbs like vegetables, fruits, and beans.
Dr. David Ludwig, thank you so much for talking with us on the People's Pharmacy today.
A pleasure to talk to you.
You've been listening to Dr. David Ludwig, endocrinologist and researcher at Boston Children's Hospital. He's professor of pediatrics at Harvard Medical School and professor of nutrition at the Harvard School of Public Health. He's the founding director of the Optimal Weight for Life program at Boston Children's Hospital and also directs the New Balance Foundation Obesity Prevention Center. His new book, Always Hungry: Conquer Cravings, Retrain Your Fat Cells, and Lose Weight Permanently, will be published on January 5th, 2016. His website is drdavidludwig.com. You'll find links to it from our website, along with a link to his New York Times article, Could Your Healthy Diet Make Me Fat?
We invite you to join the conversation at 888-472-3366. How do you keep from putting on weight over the holidays? Tell us your story at 888-472-3366 or by email radio@peoplespharmacy.com or via Twitter @peoplespharmacy.
And Joe, we've got an email from Elliot, who is a nutritional consultant. He says we're reinventing the wheel. The idea that we're not all the same metabolically is not a new concept. Many ancient health models, most notably Ayurvedic medicine, divides people into different body types. And for many years, alternative practitioners have been talking about bio-individuality, which is another term for the whole topic. A food journal is a really incredible tool people can use to monitor their own progress or lack thereof with various nutrition programs. A food journal is a great tool.
You know, I heard this 30 years ago from the people at Structure House. You know, Durham, North Carolina used to be Fat Center, USA. People would come from all over the world to, the rice diet or, some other dietary approach. And what everybody seemed to say was the one common denominator that really seemed to be helpful, a food diary. And so if you keep a food diary and kind of keep track of how you feel, that could very well be your ticket to personalized nutrition. Let's go to the phones. Abilene, Texas. Antonio, welcome to the People's Pharmacy. What's up?
Yeah, hi. I was calling to ask you what your thoughts are on these sugar substitutes like stevia, and we're trying to limiting our glycemic index and spikes in insulin. Do you have any thoughts on their health attributes, how they affect us?
Okay, well, good question, Antonio. A lot of other people want to know the same thing. Terry, I guess of all of them, I guess I like stevia the best. But you know what Dr. Siegel said?
I do. I was fascinated to hear him say that consuming those artificial sweeteners can change our gut flora, and not always in ways that are beneficial to us. So I think there's a lot yet to be learned about the impact of artificial sweeteners. And I think simply substituting artificial sweeteners and keeping on with sweetness is perhaps not the best approach. There's some research out of the Monell Institute that tested lowering people's sugar intake. They took people who were normally consuming 2 or more sugar or corn syrup sweetened soft drinks a day, and they put them on a low sugar diet for 3 months, and it turned out that at the end of that time, their perception of sweetness of other foods was much more sensitive, so things tasted sweeter to them. Now, unfortunately, they also preferred the really sweet stuff, so it didn't solve the problem.
There is that. Absolutely. Let's go to the phones. Paulette in Thaxton, Virginia. Welcome to the People's Pharmacy.
Hi, Joanne and Terry. Thank you for taking my call.
You bet.
I have food allergies, and everything I make has to be homemade. My allergies are to soy, lecithin, vitamin E, if it's not natural, gluten, not the gluten, but the glycerin, glycerol, all of that stuff I'm allergic to. I make my own bread, and I use local honey, and I use organic wheat berries. And when I eat my bread, I have like 2 slices a day. Are the organic wheat berries just as bad for us as the wheat that you buy in the store, or am I eating healthy by grinding my own?
I would say, in general, you're eating healthier by grinding your own because it's not nearly as processed as what you would have bought in the store. So if you don't have a gluten sensitivity, then you're probably doing just fine, Paulette. Are you feeling good?
I am, but I'm trying to lose weight, and I'm having a very difficult time. I try to stay away from all sugars and use everything with honey. And I've adapted my homemade muffins, my cookies, so that I can use honey instead of any kind of sugar. And I did buy raw sugar, but I found out in doing research that raw sugar isn't any better for me or my customers when I bake than the white sugar.
Well, I hate
exactly
to
right,
say
and neither
this.
is honey.
Yeah,
probably.
Honey is nice. It tastes good. It's quote unquote natural, but your body really can't tell the difference. But hey, thanks for the call, and good luck with the weight loss, especially over the next couple of weeks.
And, Joe, we've got an email from Jim in Winchester, Virginia. He says, about age 60, I was diagnosed with non-celiac gluten intolerance. Okay, so He can't manage gluten. I'm now age 74 and my weight remains about 15 pounds less than in my gluten-eating days. I think a lot of the weight loss was due to eliminating most desserts and sweet snacks, as I now eat only limited amounts of gluten-free sweet treats. But some researchers claim benefits from eating gluten, and I feel great. My cardiologist just told me I'm the healthiest patient he has. So, in his particular instance, with that gluten sensitivity, he is staying off the gluten and doing well.
Bill, in Fort Worth, Texas, we only have about 30 seconds left. What's on your mind?
Quickly, I think we need to start with our mind. Be mindful and listen to your body. If you're not hungry, don't eat. I don't eat in the morning, and that was written up in the Whitaker Diet book. And don't get involved with distractions. You know, we seem to eat more when we're around people or watching television or our cell phone. So I believe in this intuitive diet. Just listen to your body.
I think that makes total sense. Thank you so much, Bill. You know, we have a good friend who says, I'm on the seafood diet. I see food and I eat it. Maybe it's time to change that and follow Bill's good example. Well, that's just about all the time we have. Thank you so much for listening to the People's Pharmacy, and we'd love to get your emails if you've got some suggestions about how to make it through the holidays without gaining weight. Well, let us know your tricks and your treats. That's radio@peoplespharmacy.com.
Lynn Siegel produced today's show. Sophie Copeland provided technical assistance. Al Wadarski is the engineer. Dave Graydon edits our interviews.
The People's Pharmacy is produced at the studios of North Carolina Public Radio, WUNC.
The People's Pharmacy theme music is by B.J. Liederman.
The People's Pharmacy is made possible by Red X Industries, makers of Utterly Smooth Extra Care 20 Cream with 20% urea for extra skin protection. That phone number is 800-345-7339. The website is uttercream.com.
If you'd like to order a copy of today's show, you can call 800-732-2334. The number of the show is 1017. That number to place an order again, 800-732-2334. You can also order it online at peoplespharmacy.com. And by the way, at peoplespharmacy.com, you can also find an MP3.
And when you go to the site, you'll also find links to both Dr. Siegel's research and the article in the New York Times, which shows Dr. Ludwig's reaction to Dr. Siegel's research. It's a really cool article.
It's all pretty fascinating.
It's a fascinating article. You'll want to read it, and you'll find a link at the peoplespharmacy.com website. You'll also find information about prescription drugs, herbs, and home remedies when you go to the site, and you can subscribe to the free podcast of our show. You can also make it available to a friend. It's all there at peoplespharmacy.com. In Durham, North Carolina, I'm Joe Graydon.
And I'm Terry Graydon. Thank you very much for listening, and please do join us again next week.
We hope you enjoyed this podcast. If so, please consider taking a minute to write a review on iTunes. And thanks for listening to The People's Pharmacy.
This is an ad by BetterHelp. BetterHelp recently surveyed over 16,000 people and found that while 75% of people believe it's wise to seek support, only 27% of Americans are in therapy, and people stay silent to avoid being judged. BetterHelp has over 10 years of experience matching you with the right therapist. Because we're all better with help. Visit BetterHelp.com/StopTheStigma for their first ever State of Stigma report, the latest in mental health research.